Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Judson Memorial Church. It's wonderful to see faces I recognize, wonderful to see a few faces out there that I don't recognize. If you could use the reminder, or if we've never met, my name is Micah. I'm the senior minister here at Judson, and you are entering this space on a very special day. It is both the first Sunday of Advent of 2024, which we will be lighting a candle for, and that candle today is the candle for hope. So if you've come for some radical hope, we're going to be lighting a candle for that very, very shortly. It is also World AIDS Day, which we will be commemorating in multiple ways throughout the service. So look forward to hearing not only about World AIDS Day and our continuing fight to destigmatize HIV and AIDS, but also to hear a little bit of Judson history related to the early days of that AIDS epidemic, which is still continuing no matter how much of a lack of attention it gets. I want you to do two things before we dive into this service properly. One is to turn to that camera right here if you are in the space in person, and wave hello to our Judson online community. It's so wonderful to see all of you out there. And Natalie, thank you for holding that space. We can't wait to have you projected on the back wall shortly so that we can all share celebrations and concerns. And now I invite you to give your attention as we acknowledge the first peoples of this land. We gather today on land that is the ancestral home of the Munsee Lenape tribe of the Lenni Lenape people. We acknowledge these people of the Stony Country and decry the unjust taking of their Lenape hoking. To acknowledge well and move beyond ceremony to reciprocity, we commit to making meaningful connections between the original people and their ancestral land in order to counteract the myth-spinning systems which still threaten and kill many of us today, including white supremacy, Christian supremacy, and settler colonialism. And we commit to counteracting all harm to original peoples that perpetuates a narrative of erasure. And now, if you are wondering how you can get more deeply involved in the work that we're naming as we read that land acknowledgement, come and find me after the service. Our Sacred Reckonings group would love to have you join their work to have Judson lean more intentionally into being an anti-racist and decolonized community and space, and we'd love to have you join that work. And now, I turn it over to Henco to take us more deeply into this service. And now we are going to connect last week's Autumn Harvest shared meal with this week's Advent through a means of gratitude. If you had a hand in last week's Autumn shared meal and making that beauty happen in the space, please raise your hand. Everybody look around at these folks. Putting tables up, getting food out. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you especially to Sharon Willems for creating the beautiful decorations. I don't see her with us yet, but Sharon, we hope that you feel the gratitude wherever you are. I also now want to make a note about these decorations and invite Ted Dawson up to the front to tell us a little bit about what this beauty is in front of us.
Thank you, Micah. I'm Ted Dawson, he, him, part of the Judson Flower Committee. And as you see, we were presented with a challenge this year where we normally have poinsettias and Christmas trees and the such that we keep up all during Advent. Our meeting room is so busy during the week that we were asked to make something that would be mobile. So on Monday with our friends at Mutual Aid and many of you on the Flower Committee, we cut these papers out and we put them up. And my point being, it's meant to be interactive, so if anyone feels at all inspired to add to that or detract from that, let me know. It can happen, and we're happy you like it, so thank you.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you to the Flower Power Committee. Today is the first of 4 Sundays where our beloved community ministers and I and Reverend Bridget will be leading us through some explorations of Mary's really radical, powerful song throughout the Gospels called the Magnificat. It is my honor to say that today, community minister Emily Farthing will be leading us through a meditation, so look forward to that momentarily. But as we prepare for that, I ask you to rise in body and or spirit, and let's join together in a kind of Magnificat. Our souls are meant to magnify divinity, so why do we settle for staying so small? Join me. We are meant to be saved by joint joy, so why do we tear ourselves apart with apartheid? We are chosen to uplift the next generations, so why do we instead choose the weight of hate? We are born to balance our strength and sanctuary, so why do bombs overshadow our benevolence? We are blessed to inherit abundant bubbles of vision, so why do we scatter them amongst the mounting rubble? We are able to root the future in both history and hope, so why does dishonesty strangle our growth? We are equipped to embody a love beyond the local, so why do we build borders of inward-facing apathy? We are pushed toward peace by every faithful fiber of our frames. So may we listen for ourselves over the saddest sounds of ourselves and magnify a ceasefire on our souls. Amen. Let's join in singing. Before we start this, hold on one sec. I need to give props where they're due. O come, Emmanuel. I know there's going to be folks that are like, I want the old lyrics. We're going to sing those old lyrics sometime in the future, okay? But I serve on the Israel-Palestine Network of the United Church of Christ, and the amazing Linda Noonan has written these amazing new lyrics to O come, Emmanuel. So sing these first 2 verses today with aplomb. We'll get to the old lyrics eventually. Sing these lyrics. See what it does to your body. Lean into radical hope and see if you can change yourself a little bit. and I invite you to remain standing. And I want to invite Sebastian Funderburgh up to the front here. Sebastian, where are you? Come over here. I want to do a little Q&A before you light this candle, okay? How many times have you lit an Advent candle in your time on this planet? Do you know?
Not exactly, probably around 3.
Okay, somewhere in between 3 and 4 and 6 and 7 is the truth. And the truth today is that, Sebastian, you are going to light our candle for radical hope. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being the radical hope that we wish to see in the world. Go for it. Thank you, Sebastian. Round of applause for Sebastian. 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 times. And let's sing together.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Michael Koehn, and a little over a year ago, Henco and I worked on a new Advent song that those of you who were here last year probably remember. And so we're reintroducing it. I'm going to sing through it once to put it in your ears, and then if everyone would join me for the second time. Thank you. Where is our hope when the powerful oppress and the voices of hate are so strong? We will hope in the words of the prophets of old and the promise of this world's salvation. We pray for Messiah in a time of confusion. We won't be idle in this time of unrest. We will act justly. We will love mercy. We will humbly walk, awaiting Emmanuel. Where is our hope when the powerful oppress and the voices of hate are so strong? We will hope in the words of the prophets of old and the promise of this world's salvation. We pray for Messiah in a time of confusion. We won't be idle in this time of unrest. We will act justly. We will love mercy. We will humbly walk, awaiting Emmanuel. Thank you. Be seated.
Good morning, Judson. Good morning, staff. And now for today's ancient testimony, as Micah mentioned, the Magnificat from Luke. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies God, and my spirit rejoices in God, for God has looked with favor on the lowly state of God's servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. And holy is God's name. Indeed, God's mercy is for the ones, or for those who fear God from generation to generation. God has shown strength with God's arm. God has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. God has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. God has come to the aid of God's child Israel in remembrance of God's mercy, according to the promise God made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to God's descendants forever. What a speech. There is a lot there. And for this season of Advent, as Micah mentioned, us community ministers are going to be breaking down this really big, grand speech into fragments. And so the fragment that I'm going to meditate on with you today are just the first 2 lines, just the first 2. Those are them. And I need to be honest with you that in my 3 years of going to seminary and my 30 years attending UCC churches and celebrating Advent, and I'm actually very excited to go first because I love the first day of Advent. At my church, we would have a big Advent festival with wreath making and decorations and food, so it's an honor. But in this whole time, I assumed that the Magnificat came right after the Annunciation, which is when Gabriel comes and tells Mary, hey, you're pregnant. So in my head, it was like, okay, Gabriel comes and it's this big, angelic, beautiful voice, and then Mary's like, oh, I rejoice, and that's the moment in my head. But it's not. So Mary needs a beat. And a hot take on these 2 lines is that Mary's first reaction isn't rejoicing. It isn't gratitude and it isn't praise. And when I first read these 2 lines, and then I had to reread them and reread them again, I just came up with these 2 questions again and again and again. So I'm going to ask them to you. Question number 1, what does a soul magnifying the divine or God look like? What would it look like if your soul magnified God? So meditate on that. And the second question is Mary. Like, who is Mary? If she sings this grand song, and in Luke, we get a more fleshed out version of Mary versus the previous 2 Gospels of Mark and Matthew. In Luke, we get her as a teenager, her in troubled, her singing this song, her being chosen as the mother of God. But why is Mary a fixed figure? Why is Mary so unmalleable in ways, stuck in a virginal purity that also chains us to unrealistic and unjust sexual scrutiny? So for the next few minutes, I'm going to dive in and meditate on 3 M's. Drum roll, the anticipation. The 3 M's are Mary, number 1, mirroring is number 2, and magnifying is number 3. So first there is, yes, woo! And also props to this photo I took a class on Mary in my last semester of seminary, and for my project I made these images of Mary, and the makeup artist that did the iconic makeup for these and that little tear is my friend Kendra, who's here for the first time. I'm so grateful. So first, Mary. Now, are there any colors that come to your mind when you think of Mary? Blue, white, okay. Keep those in your head and be prepared to let them go. Now, I realize that in my assumption that the Magnificat came directly after the Annunciation, this was because I have a fixed image of who Mary is. I have been raised by religious storytelling in the church, but also in museums, in fashion, cultural references, in which Mary is it. It. Maybe not the it girl, but like the it immaculate virgin. She is typically in blue, maybe looking down or maybe like looking up at Jesus, the light. And she is the epitome of delicate, acceptable femininity, purity, an impossible measuring stick. Now, going back to the Bible, each gospel author, as I mentioned, subsequently gives us a little bit more of Mary and who she is. And by the time we get to Luke, she's a teenager. And in John, she is a mother of a grown man. And there's this famous scene in John. Does anyone know what this painting is or who it's by? Yes, the wedding at Cana. And does anyone know where it is? It's in the Louvre, opposite a bonus M, the Mona Lisa. Exactly. I knew Judson folks would know this. And the Louvre had to intentionally put this painting, their biggest painting, opposite the Mona Lisa because there are so many people that want to see the Mona Lisa. So this painting is giant. And in the middle of all the chaos, there are two figures that are equal, two figures that are haloed, and two figures that are on the same status. Mary and Jesus as equals. And in this scene, a very human thing happens. We all remember the scene as Jesus turning water into wine, but Jesus doesn't want to do it. It's actually his mom that's like, hey, Jesus, we're at this party and they just ran out of wine, like, it's time. Reveal yourself, do it. And Jesus actually refuses and is like, come on, not the time. And Mary is like, we'll see about that. And turns to the people who are working at the party and is like, it's gonna happen. Like, do what Jesus says. And kind of prompts Jesus to reveal himself in that moment. Very human relationship, right? But again, this painting kind of reflects how Mary seems to be one thing in the text, very human mom, a worried teen. But then in our culture, she gets blown up into this immalleable, posit saint archetype that is unmoving, unwavering. Now, for early Christians in the first century who read or heard these early accounts of Mary and Jesus, it is actually Mary that is Jesus's humanity. She is the softness to Jesus's godness as people are trying to understand their story. She is the intercessor in Luke. There is the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and earth, of which Mary is the bridge. She is the connective tissue, the juicy embodied mess. But there still isn't any evidence in the earliest Christian writings in the first century that people were worshiping her individually. She was very much human. This frozen virginal status, this sainthood, would be a part of her evolution alongside Christianity's evolution under and then into empire. Now, after the Gospel of John was written, there is another gospel that is written about Mary. Anyone know that one? Seminarians? With a lot of seminarians? It's the Proto-Evangelium, or the Gospel of James. And that is Mary's nativity story. Because in order for people to grapple, okay, is Jesus God or human? How much of God is in Jesus and how much human is in he? They had to establish Mary's divine status. And so we have the Gospel of James. And in this account, Mary is also born of a virgin. The angel comes to Anna, Mary's mother, and it says, you are going to have a baby with God. And as the gospel continues, her virginal and pure status is so amplified. There's this quote about her as a young teen saying, "Then she made a sanctuary in her bedroom and did not allow anything impure or unclean to pass through her lips." As it continues into Mary's more adult life and pregnancy, it even modifies the birth of Jesus from Matthew and Luke to insert a midwife into that scene. And so after Jesus is born, the midwife looks at Mary's parts and goes, "Yep, she's a virgin." Now, this purity language at this 2nd century time matches the 2nd century tendency towards asceticism and the high regard placed on continence and abstinence. And Mary becomes the archetype for the female virgin. She becomes the archetype of denying oneself pleasure and not being embodied. She becomes a useful tool of her patriarchal, empirical surroundings to promote subordination while taking away her humanity. Mary becomes fixed. Women become fixed. We all become more fixed. Now, around the same time that this Gospel of James is written, you have Justin Martyr on the scene. Justin Martyr. Now, he is a 2nd century philosopher, and at the center of his theology and around salvation is Mary's virginity and the Magnificat speech. Justin believes that Mary's piety in this speech and her chastity make up for Eve's sin. Justin uses the virgin birth account in the Gospel of James to dispute his opponents and argue that Mary is a virgin and she is sacred. And as foretold in Isaiah, she is linked from the Hebrew Bible to the New Testament, all of this on the weight of her virginal status. The weight of politics resting on a woman's body torn apart in the middle. Now, Irenaeus, who followed Justin, took it even further, if that is possible. And Irenaeus proclaimed that Mary is at the root of human salvation. He believes that Christ is the new Adam and Mary is the new Eve, and their rightful actions and piety right the wrongs of all their predecessors, bringing about salvation to all humanity. Again, the crux of his argument resting on Mary's virginity, piety, purity. And in opposition to Mary is Eve, the whore, the sinner. And the creation of this Mary and Eve dichotomy will go on to haunt women ad infinitum, as we are continuously, advertently or inadvertently placed in either trope. You are a sinner or you are a saint. You are a whore or you are a virgin. A dangerous ideology. An ideology that womanist theologians today argue is at the backbone of centuries of rationalizing slavery, oppression, and violence towards women of color, who historically have been placed into the Eve trope, while white women get placed into the Virgin Mary trope. Who the F is Mary really, though? Perhaps why we love the Magnificat so much is it because it can do so much for us. It can either reinforce this fixed, immaculate Saint God Mother Mary, but if you look closely, it can shatter it. Now, the Magnificat does not come directly after the Annunciation. It is 17 lines after. Mary needs 17 lines to process, or as Micah would say, to be messy. Or in the sterile biblical words of Luke 29, Mary is troubled when she gets the news. Yes, she is not ecstatic to be pregnant in between living situations, homeless and on the move. None of this is really praiseworthy to Mary. She is not excited, she is troubled. We are troubled by unfixing Mary from her archetypal other status and fleshing her out in these 17 lines of in between. We can explore the 17 lines that we are in. As we accept things we don't want to accept, as we're totally freaked out, as we're troubled, as we're trying to process. The 17 lines of in between are our own 17 lines of breath and going, WTF. And Mary's too, because something big is coming. So what do? We text our friends, we come here, we gather. And what does Mary do? Well, she cannot go on IG and post about it or text her friends, so she runs. She runs as fast as she can, it says, up into the hills. So she is running, she's probably sweating, panting, probably trembling, freaking out, like, what? This thing just came to me. And she gets to Elizabeth's house, and she's probably covered in sweat, and she just gets there, and before she can even say anything, Elizabeth looks at her and says, oh, look at you. You're a miracle. Wow, look at you. And in that moment, I don't think Mary rejoiced. I think she collapsed and sobbed. Someone sees me. And yes, in the text, it says that God notices Mary, but God notices Mary through Elizabeth. Elizabeth mirrors to Mary the miracle that she is. And we are mirrors to each other. My soul magnifies God, and my spirit rejoices in God, for God has looked with favor on the lowly state of God's servant. I choose radical hope, even though I am totally freaked out. God is so good. We can do this, Mary says. Which brings us to the very last M. We have Mary, we have mirroring, and now magnify. And that question of what does it look like if your soul magnified God? And if you need more time, awesome. Take this week, take today, take all year. Magnify what is spectacularly radiant in your life with your soul. And as I was reflecting on that question for me, I thought about what I love doing, which is taking photos. Oh, there's Elizabeth and Mary. And when I am taking photos with someone, I get to be on the ground with them, and I get to stand up with them, and I get to move around with them, and I get to listen to them, and I get to physically magnify. A magnifying glass is a convex glass that goes outward, people's radiance back onto them, and then I get to capture it and show it to them and be like, look at you, you're so amazing. And so I asked a couple other of my photographer friends the same question. What does it look like when your soul magnifies the divine? And here are some examples. This is by the same artist who did your cover image, Stephen Klapko. And he said, our bodies in connection to nature, grounding moments in which we feel part of the larger universal picture, even if that makes us feel small. That is the divine for me. And Gerardo Lopez, and my friend in Mexico, for him, magnifying the divine is the youth and innocence of a child. And this is a photo that I took of my mom's hands interlaced with my grandma's, because I realized that just like I fix Mary, I fix my mom, and I fix my grandma into unmoving archetypes. And what I loved about looking at these two lines and the 17 lines of breath are just that, breath, and then movement, and then change, and then letting go. The realness of Mary as someone who is scared and confused and troubled, and of a lot of other things that we probably don't know about her, which is great. And when we start to unfix her, literally shake off what we think of her, we start to do that about everyone, right? People become less archetypal and more people, and we become liberated. Mary doesn't have to be an archetypal other. We can set her free, and we become free to hope, to mirror, and to magnify. And so with that, I asked you to join me in body or spirit as we sing together.
Our modern testimony is from unaids.org, World AIDS Day 2024, Take the Rights Path. The world can end AIDS if everyone's rights are protected. With human rights at the center, with communities in the lead, the world can end AIDS as a public health threat. by 2030. The substantial progress that has been made in the HIV response is directly linked to progress in protecting human rights. In turn, the progress made through the HIV response has galvanized broader progress in realizing the right to health and strengthening health systems. But gaps in the realization of human rights for all are keeping the world from getting on the path that ends AIDS and are hurting public health. And now a surge of attacks on rights is threatening to undermine the progress that has been made. Ending AIDS requires that we reach and engage everyone who is living with, at risk for, or affected by HIV, especially including people who have been most excluded and marginalized. Gender equality is an essential element of an approach to AIDS that is grounded in human rights. Acceptance, respect, and care are vital. Laws, policies, and practices that punish, discriminate against, or stigmatize people because they're women or girls, or from key populations, or from other marginalized communities, obstruct access to HIV prevention, testing, treatment, and care. So do laws, policies, and practices that hinder the work of people who are providing vital HIV services for affected communities, or who are advocating for reforms. The path that ends AIDS is a rights path. Upholding the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights and fostering inclusion of all communities are essential for ending AIDS, for ensuring sustainable development, and for human security. There is an urgent need to remove criminal and other laws which harm people's rights, and an urgent need to enact laws and approaches which uphold the rights of every person. The mandates in the International Human Rights Framework have the force of law, and communities have the right to hold duty bearers accountable for adherence to the human rights commitments they have made. To highlight the narrative continuation in UN AIDS messaging, the campaign continues the imagery of a path that leaders need to choose. Here, that path is signposted as the rights path. Because change depends not on a moment, but on a movement. The message, "Take the rights path," will not only ring out on one day, it will be at the core of activities that will build up across November, see the release of the World AIDS Day report entitled "Take the Rights Path" on the 26th of November, and reach a crescendo on World AIDS Day on the 1st of December, and continue to echo throughout December and beyond. The upholding of everyone's human rights is an essential underpinning of an effective HIV response. The World AIDS Day is a call to action to protect everyone's health by protecting everyone's rights. Leaders need to take the rights path.
So I will be very, very brief because I know we've got a big table in the middle of this room and we want to have our communion moment. But as I listen to KP read these words from this year's World AIDS Day statement, and as I listen to the beautiful words of Emily reminding us of the power of using our own souls to magnify the divine and to mirror one another's miraculous brilliance, I have a major image in my mind, and some of you actually might have been there, but I think many of you don't necessarily know this image. I have the image of this very room. I wasn't there, but there's footage of it. Judson's meeting room, filled with frightened, grieving, angry people as they hold a funeral for a loved one who has just died from complications due to HIV/AIDS. And this funeral is not just any funeral. It was 1992, right in the middle of a time when stigma against people living with HIV was running rampant, and so-called sacred spaces were turning away the droves of people who were dying and mourning. These so-called sacred spaces were refusing to host funerals for anyone who was dying due to this horrifying public health crisis. So this 1992 funeral right here in Judson's meeting room was not just a funeral, it was a political funeral. It was the funeral of 38-year-old ACT UP member Mark Lowe Fisher, who was also a member of a group called, and you cannot make this up, a group called the Marys, who made sure that people who had died of HIV/AIDS were given funerals in some way, and that their death was marked by love and anger and fury. They were an affinity action group who organized those funerals, and Mark was one of the leaders. According to Mark's wishes, immediately following this ritual for Mark's life here at Judson, more than 300 AIDS activists carried the open coffin that was holding Mark's body all the way from Washington Square to the Republican headquarters on West 43rd Street. And at that site, on the eve of the presidential election, mourners indicted George Bush with Mark Lowe Fisher's murder. The 2024 World AIDS Day theme is Take the Rights Path. And we are in the midst of preparation for an incoming presidential term that is already hard at work eroding the rights of already endangered communities. So the ways we talk about, think about, take action about, or don't talk about, don't think about, and don't take action about the rights to healthcare and education and the destigmatization of AIDS is directly linked to the ways that we talk about, think about, take action about, or don't talk about, don't think about, don't take action about the rights of all trans bodies and souls, LGBTQIA+ bodies and souls, migrating bodies and souls, black and brown bodies and souls, disabled bodies and souls being ravaged by militarism and genocide, so many already endangered and impoverished bodies and souls who must be magnified and mirrored if we are going to actually embody the fiercely divine brilliance that actively aches within each and every one of us. And here's the gospel truth. We have done it before in this sacred space, in this sanctuary, and we are being called right now to do it again. So while you are figuring out what that divine brilliance is that's baking inside you every moment of every day, figure out how you're going to mirror it. Figure out how you're going to turn to your neighbor and figure out how to help them with magnifying their own souls, their own bodies, especially the most endangered souls and bodies. Because this gathering that we're about to do at this table, this gathering that we do all the time in this space, this is a rehearsal for how we intend to co-create a new kind of kingdom out in the world. This coming together in sacred space has always been a political act, one where we magnify the divine and mirror one another's brilliance in order to counteract the deadliest endangerments of empire. We're not just eating here today. We are not just drinking, we're not just singing some songs, we are collaborating. And we are recommitting to serving as empire-abolishing accomplices together. All of us need all of us to make it. We are not just in a dress rehearsal, we are at opening night, right now. So what will you do for the bodies that are most in danger of being broken? Think about that when you break that bread. What will you do to nourish the thirstiest souls among us? Think about that when you're drinking from that cup. What will you do to nourish the thirstiest souls among us? Ask that as you ask, what would Mary do? What would the Marys do? We are one another's Magnificats. Take the rights path. Make sure that everyone around you not only has something to eat and drink, but that we're magnifying our divine call to mirror the brilliance within each of us, refusing to stay silent and fighting like hell for all endangered human rights. Eat, drink, magnify, mirror. Take a few minutes now to make sure that everybody gets something. And I love this moment because it's when I have 2 more sentences to say, but I feel the rustling. Everybody wants to get to the table. Rustle away. Get to that table. Take a few minutes now to make sure everyone has what they need at this table. I will call us back together in a moment to join in an act that has always been political: communion. Get your stuff. I'll call us back together in a moment. And you might have said, "Take and eat. This is broken bread that represents my body that might soon be broken. Whenever you eat of it, don't just remember my broken body, but fight to make sure that there are no more broken bodies in our future. Until that day, let's eat together." Then he lifted up a cup, and you might have said something like, "This might look like some normal cup, but this is a cup of magnification. Whenever you drink of this, remember the divine indwelling within you, and remember the promise that we're making tonight, that no matter what, you will love one another as I have loved you." Let's drink together. And that table that they were gathered at stretches now through millennia. It stretches from this space through that camera so that all of you who are online are with us in this space too. This table has been used to exclude, but to us, this is a table of agape. This is a commitment to build a longer table. Let's sing that promise together now. Now is the moment in our service where you will see old-fashioned baskets going around this space, but there are also multiple ways that you can give online if you have anything to spare to support the people and this place and these programs that are the ways that we magnify divinity and that we mirror the value of each human life in this place. For those of you online, there are multiple ways listed in the bulletin, and I believe they'll be listed in the chat as well. Please give as you're able. No gift is too small. No gift is too large. And please enjoy this creative gift from Ruby Rims.
May 28th, 1992. I was 38 years old. I was diagnosed with AIDS. In those days, it was a death sentence. and we lived on borrowed time. Somehow, due to the powers that be, I'm still here. And I am now 71 years old. The only downfall of surviving AIDS is you get old. And then, once again, you live on borrowed time. I never thought that there could be a love like yours and mine. I never dreamed that I would see the day that I would find a love that feels so right. But here we are tonight. And now the only thing we really need is time. We live on borrowed time. No one can be sure when the loan will finally come due. But I'm loving all of mine. I know what time is for. I borrowed it so I could spend it all right here with you. There was a time when I believed that life held guarantees. There was a time when I was sure my future was secure. But life had other plans. The future's in God's hands. And knowing that has let me live and love you more. We live on borrowed time. Yesterday is past. Tomorrow seems a million miles away. But I promise you that I'm gonna make love last by living every moment, every hour, every day. Now we may have a year and we may have a lifetime. No one can be certain what the future will allow. But you and I are here, and this time is the right time. 'Cause one thing that I know is that we have each other now. And now we'll live on borrowed time. Let's celebrate and sing as we walk bravely into the unknown. 'Cause we're gonna be just fine. Whatever life may bring, we'll face it all together, and we'll never be alone. We may not have forever, but our time will be our own.
If you are on your feet, stay on your feet. We're going to benedict. Now that we've heard this angel raise the roof off this place, you've got one more chance to raise your voices like angels and get the clay tile roof officially off this building. But before we do that, this service might be ending, but our service in the world continues. Go out and magnify, go out and mirror, and remember that we are the change that we wish to see in the world. I hear angels. Is it you? Sing away. Amen. right, we still got 24 days to go, okay? Would you please be seated? Now is the moment where we welcome the online community who have been patiently worshiping with us in the Zoom room into this physical space on the back wall. So wonderful to see you all. Come on in. And this is the moment where we open up this podium, this pulpit, for folks to share celebrations and concerns. One note that I would like to make is that we're going to do a little bit of an experiment. It's written for you in your bulletin. I'm going to read it for you now, and we're going to have it written and read it as a way of entering into this space. Our celebrations and concerns sharing time is a sacred and prayerful community building extension of our Sunday morning service. In order to respect time, we try to limit this moment to no more than a total of 25 minutes each Sunday. In order to allow for the most congregants to share, we ask the sharers not take more than 2 minutes each. To help with this, our pastors, today me and online Natalie, will each give the sharer a first wave when they've hit 1 minute so that they can begin to wrap up their share, and then a second little wave when they have hit 2 minutes so that we can move to the next sharer. Let's experiment now.